Picture this. You're making dinner tonight. It's practically automatic, right? You just pull up a recipe on your phone, glance at the screen, and follow the steps. Combine these ingredients, heat the oven to exactly 350 degrees, add a pinch of salt. You know the drill. We've totally turned cooking into this flawless system where you don't even really have to think about it. But if you step back, that actually brings up a pretty wild mystery. I mean, how on earth did anyone, thousands of years ago, figure out how to make pizza or pasta or bake a loaf of bread in the very first place? Welcome to our explainer on the culinary laboratory of our ancestors. Let's dive in.
Seriously, how did anyone invent the recipe? Because someone, somewhere deep in our history, had to actively try this stuff out. They had to burn food, taste some absolutely terrible concoctions, waste precious calories, and experiment with mixing things hundreds and hundreds of times before anything actually worked. And get this, they did it without recipe books, no internet, definitely no cooking shows, and zero fundamental knowledge of chemistry. So how'd they pull it off? And what does that success actually tell us about human intelligence?
Well, the short answer is that for early humans, innovation wasn't just some optional hobby. It was literal survival. Early hunter-gatherers were up against some incredibly dire stakes. Sure, hunting and gathering provided calories, but absolutely not consistently. Meat spoiled super fast. Plants were strictly seasonal. And the whole concept of long-term food storage? Basically impossible. They had to figure out how to make their food last and how to make it safe to eat, or they simply wouldn't survive. It was do or die.
Just think about the brutal reality of eating raw food versus what happens when you finally introduce fire. Raw meat takes an enormous amount of physical effort just to chew. Raw plant starches, largely indigestible for us. Plus, both of them carry deadly pathogen loads. We're talking parasites and bacteria that cause severe illness. But the second early humans harnessed fire, they unlocked this monumental advantage. Suddenly, cooked food is highly digestible, way more nutritious, and infinitely safer. And the biggest game changer? It freed up massive amounts of bodily energy. Energy that our ancestors' bodies could then redirect into developing much bigger, more complex human brains.
Part 1. Accidental discoveries. The mistakes that worked.
Now, just tossing a chunk of meat onto a fire isn't a recipe, right? That's just applying heat. The very first true recipes, those specific combinations of ingredients and techniques, weren't carefully planned out by scientists in lab coats. They were actually just really fortunate mistakes. Imagine someone accidentally leaving a piece of meat on some glowing coals, just a bit too long, only to realize the charred outside actually tasted amazing. Or wrapping food in large leaves just to carry it around, and then finding out that cooking it in those leaves kept the meat perfectly moist. These little happy accidents evolved into this primitive scientific method. Step 1, observation. Hey, the meat burns. Step 2, memory. Wow, that tastes good. Step 3, and this is absolutely crucial, communication. They had to tell others in the group about it. And finally, step 4, repetition, doing it on purpose next time. For an accident to become a lasting technique, you literally have to be able to tell someone, hey, do this, and then do this, and they have to remember it.
In those happy accidents, when you pair them with memory and communication, led to some truly incredible breakthroughs. Take spontaneous fermentation. Just picture the scene. Someone accidentally leaves a handful of gathered grain or some wild berries sitting in a damp, dark corner of a cave or a rudimentary container. Over time, wild yeasts naturally go to work, creating this entirely new, bubbly, intoxicating substance. Then, some incredibly brave soul actually tastes this damp, fermented mush, feels that completely novel, intoxicating effect, and immediately thinks, whoa, we have to figure out how to make this happen again.
Part 2. Systematic exploration. Testing the boundaries.
At a certain point, ancient humans actually stopped just stumbling upon these happy accidents and started acting more like a real kitchen laboratory. They went from being passive observers of their food to active experimenters. Obviously, they couldn't write down formal hypotheses, but they asked some really profound questions through their everyday actions. Like, what happens if we add more of this specific plant? What if we cook the meat much, much longer? What if we change the temperature, or add water? Or maybe mix this animal fat with these crushed berries. They were systematically exploring their environment, pushing the boundaries of plants, animals, earth, and fire.
Today, modern science gives us fancy terms for things like the Maillard reaction, fermentation bacteria, and gluten development. But ancient humans, they understood these exact same mechanics purely through intuition and sharp observation. They had no idea about the microscopic workings of gluten, but they absolutely knew for a fact that spending an hour kneading a lump of dough gave them a vastly better loaf of bread. They were basically reverse engineering incredibly complex chemistry using nothing but their senses. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
And this sheer brilliance? It was happening all over the globe. The Mayans didn't just sit around eating raw cacao beans, they invented chocolate through this incredibly complex, multi-step process of fermentation, roasting, and grinding. Over in Egypt, they mastered bread by perfectly controlling timing, temperature, and airborne yeasts. Native Americans completely transformed corn into this nutritional powerhouse by cooking it with wood ash alkali, which is a highly specific chemical process they mastered entirely through observation. All of this just proves that these ancient cultures possessed deeply sophisticated knowledge without a single page of written science to guide them. So this continuous cycle of learning triggered a process called cumulative innovation. Basically, once a basic technique was established, it didn't just stay static. Recipes got better and better over time through these tiny incremental improvements passed down from generation to generation. That is exactly how centuries of relentless trial-and-error experimentation led to unbelievably complex innovations like Chinese soy sauce or Japanese miso. A grandparent taught a parent who tweaked the recipe just a little bit and then taught their child, continuously refining this culinary code over hundreds and hundreds of years.
Part 3. Food as cultural identity. Expressing values through ingredients.
As these recipes became more refined, they also became deeply tied to the specific environments people lived in. I mean, what grew right outside your door dictated what you cooked. Wheat, tomatoes, and olive oil naturally formed the base in Italy, rice and soy in Asia, indigenous grains and legumes in Africa. But here's the fascinating part. As recipes evolved, entirely different cultural outcomes emerged from the exact same ingredients. Take wheat. Two cultures might have an abundance of it, but one uses their unique techniques to invent pasta, while the other develops flatbread. Both have soybeans, but one culture methodically presses them into tofu, while the other ferments them into rich soy sauce. It really goes to show that human choice, culture, and specific techniques matter just as much as the raw ingredients themselves. Because ultimately, a recipe isn't just a set of instructions. It's a vessel for cultural knowledge, values, and identity. Developing a recipe wasn't just about figuring out how to eat a little bit better on a random Tuesday night. It was about creating sacred traditions. It was about shaping community rituals, defining celebrations, and forging a really deep, lasting sense of who a people were.
Part 4. The oldest human technology. The recipe as tech.
Over time, the kitchen basically became this serious hub of optimization. Techniques didn't just stay rudimentary, they became highly specific, incredibly precise, and remarkably efficient. Starting way back in the ancient era, we see the development of highly specialized pots and grinding tools. Fast forward to the Roman Empire, and they're actually writing down complex, sophisticated cookbooks. During the medieval era, dense networks of monasteries rigorously preserve and refine these recipe traditions. And then, during the Renaissance, an explosion of global exploration brings in all these new ingredients that just trigger massive culinary innovation. But remember, every single one of these technological leaps came directly from everyday people experimenting in hot, smoky kitchens, not from scientists in sterile laboratories.
And there's actually a pretty surprising truth about these ancient technologies when you stack them up against modern foods. Modern laboratories gave us quick-rise bread and foods designed to meet, specific artificial metrics. But those ancient technologies, things like sourdough fermentation, are vastly superior for human digestion. Fermented vegetables provide these incredible microbiome health benefits that we're really only just now starting to fully understand. Slow-cooked bone broths extract deep, complex nutrition that modern, lab-created alternatives often completely miss. These ancient recipes, which were developed through harsh necessity and long-term real-world feedback, frequently just work better and are healthier than the stuff we make today.
So, what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway here boils down to 4 fundamental truths of human problem solving. Number 1, we can work brilliantly with incomplete information. We don't need to know the complex chemistry to bake the bread. Number 2, a recipe proves we can preserve complex knowledge outside the brain, passing it down across centuries. Number 3, we relentlessly refine things through cumulative improvement. And number 4, we deeply connect our physical innovations to our cultural meaning. When you recognize these 4 truths, you realize that a recipe isn't just a grocery list. It is the ultimate, undeniable evidence of the brilliant human mind at work over thousands and thousands of years.
I want to leave you with this final thought. Every single recipe started with someone asking, "What if I tried this?" Thousands of years ago, curious humans asked that question, and they asked it repeatedly, with absolutely no safety net. So the next time you sit down to a meal or casually pull up instructions on your phone, remember that hidden inside your everyday dinner is the boundless ingenuity, courage, and relentless curiosity of our ancient ancestors.
Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking questions.